Good morning and welcome to this session on Indian dress. The topic which we are going to discuss today talks about the diverse patterns of dress in India in different regions and among different age groups, and also for different occasions like ceremonies and rituals. This dress session will take you to a tour of the different patterns and how they evolved all over India. Whenever we look at Whenever we look at Indian dress, two things strike us. One is the color. Color means we have absence of any color, that is white is predominantly worn by men of all ages, that is in the traditional pattern of wearing dress, and we also have the absence of stitched clothes, that is those stitched clothes are present, there is a preference for tucked clothes. So, we see how this has come about. This has come about as a result of the development of Indian tradition over a period of 2000 years. So, first we talk about the basic ideas of dress in India. What we see in India is, in the rural areas we have the dress called dhoti, which is also the most popular dress. By the way, India does not have any national dress simply because of the fact that there is no national monolithic Indian culture which is all pervasive. So, we have only a extended minority of different cultures which together constitute the Indian mainstream. Though there is no declared national dress in India, we find that the dhoti in its different variant forms is one of the most important and popular dresses for the males. Next slide please. And next we see different variants of dhoti. So, how did this come about? One of the features you would notice in both these aspects is that, in both these photographs, is that both of them are not stitched clothes, both of them are tucked clothes. This is, we see the next dress is a saree, which is also the attire of women. What is the commonality? The commonality in both of these is that both of them are tucked clothes, not stitched. So, we now go on to how this evolved. So, when we talk about the history of dress in India, we have three landmark periods. The first is somewhere around the 2nd century BC to the 2nd century AD, when the formative ideas of Indian dress evolved, and then the second period is during the 12th to the 13th century with the coming of the Turkish invasions, and the third is during the freedom struggle. So, we see that the early sculptures which show the presence of Indian men and women in attire are dated to around the 2nd century BC to the 2nd century AD. During this period, we find Indian men and women dressed in dresses similar to the dhoti, though not exactly conforming to the modern dhoti or the saree. The upper part of the body was left uncovered or a shawl was used. Why was this done so? There was a reason for this. One of the reason is that the Bahalikas, or the people who are living in the northwestern part of India, that is beyond the frontiers of India, came into contact with the Indians. So, we see that the Bahalikas were considered as impure people by the Indians. So, some of the habits which the Bahalikas had, like example eating of onion, eating of garlic, wearing stitched clothes, wearing shoes, etc., were deemed to be uncourteous, uncivilized, and therefore not to be followed. From here on, developed the pattern of predominantly using only tucked rather than stitched clothes. The tucked clothes are tucked in such a way that each of them is formed into a pleated and then tucked in different parts of the body. The second thing is, as we had seen, is the color. White is a predominant color for men, whereas we have different patterns, colors and dyeing methods for women. So, when we talk about dress in India, how do these things relate? The second most important period when there was a change in the dresses. We had seen in ancient India, most of the women did not wear the upper garments as they are depicted in sculptures, paintings and literature. Similarly, there was large scale use of turban also among women, but this practice has disappeared, and we see a great change taking place during the 12th to the 13th century with the Turkish invasions, after which we have the adoption of stitched clothes to some extent by the members of the ruling class, that is a Turkish ruling class and also the members of the Indian ruling class. The third major change takes place during the freedom struggle. So, during the freedom struggle we see that there was a conflict between the British colonialism and the Indian freedom fighters. One of the main ideas of the freedom struggle was to overthrow the British not only in material terms, but also to overthrow British superiority in culture and then bring about a renaissance of Indian tradition. It is then we see that there is the idea of return back to Indian dress. Keeping this aside, we go on a different tour to the Indian dress in its different manifestations. So, why should we take this whole idea of a different tour to Indian dresses in its different manifestations? We see here that dress is part of identity. And how do we define identity? There are many definitions of identity. One of the definitions which captures the idea of identity in the Indian context is that identity is the conjuncture of the past with the present socio-economic relations within which we live in. To simplify it, in Indian terms, identity means not only religious but also regional, the economic strata from which they come, the economic strata from which each person is coming from, and all these are expressed in outwardly forms. One of the outwardly forms is dress. So, therefore, we have seen the modern saree. The earlier example we had seen was of a different variation of the saree. We go on to the next. This is again the saree in a different setting. This setting is from, as we had seen, the regional variation. So, when we talk of regional variation, this setting, this is again a saree. This also used to be worn as a dhoti, but again the dhoti is transformed into a saree. This comes from the state of Kerala and it is known as the Onam Munda. Munda means dhoti for men, but women wear a dhoti which is 1.5 times the size of the dress of men, and this is peculiar to Kerala. What is another peculiarity of this dress is that the color white which this dress is composed of with the gold borders is used only when in Kerala and Assam, whereas the dress white, color white is used only for widows in other parts of India. So, here we note the regional peculiarities of the evolution of dress. Next, normally sarees are 6 yards, but here we see that this particular saree this of 8 yards. So, how do we understand this? So, to understand this, we see that when we approach Indian dress, in addition to the above mentioned criteria, we also have different criteria, that is everyday dress, then we have ceremonial dress, and we have ritual dress. Predominantly everyday dress is most seen on the streets and in the working places in India, and therefore the large component of everyday dress is associated with the production oriented values of the Indian society. Since India is a country where the predominant members of the society engage in agriculture. We see that when we talk about everyday dress, we talk about the farmers and then the workers. So, when this particular dress we are talking about comes as a ceremonial dress. This is a ceremony of marriage, and as we had talked about economic strata, marriage is one particular institution in which all the wealth of the family is showcased, because it is also a matter of honor. Well, the next slide, this is the extended form of the 8-yard saree. You can see the other saree which in 6 yards, and this is 8 yards. This is also a 6-yard saree, and we also see the groom wearing a turban. Though turbans were a part of the attire of Indian males in rural areas and also in the pre-modern period, in the modern urban setting, turbans are out of use and used only for ceremonial or ritual wear. This is another variation of the saree. The only difference here is the method of draping the saree. This is predominantly found in Western India, that is in the state of Gujarat and some parts of the neighboring regions, and also in some parts of South India. So, therefore, by looking at a person's attire, we can also look at the socio-economic strata from which the person comes from, and also what type of religion or other sectarian values the person professes. How is this possible? We will look at in the coming slides. This is another variation of the saree, but you clearly notice a difference. This is a saree, but this saree is not for everyday use. This saree is only for ceremonial use. This is again a saree which is made with costly materials like silk and embroidered with gold thread, which is very costly, and therefore it is not fit for everyday use. It is only for use in rare occasions like ceremonies and rituals like marriage and other religious ceremonies. You please note the red color on this, which is one of the colors associated with rituals in large parts of North India and also in Nepal, whereas we have different colors associated in different regions. Therefore, the concept of color plays a very important role. Next, this is a modern version of the saree, that is a boutique version. Now, when we talk about identity, we also talk about different types of dress which are part of the performative identity. So, here we have the Gagra Choli, which is again a type of wear only used by the women, but that is a blouse and a gown, but this is predominant only among certain sections of the society. This particular dress is coming from Western India and also from the nomadic people. This is another version of the Gagra Choli, which is now stylized. This is also another version of the Gagra Choli, again which is stylized and used in as part of a modern day attire. Now, we can understand Indian diversity only if we look at the different sections of the society. Here is a dress of the, as we had already mentioned, that there is no national dress in India because there is a large amount of diversity among the Indian population. So, here we see that this dress is a dress of the Lambadas or the Banjaras. These dresses can be understood only if we look at the symbolic and cultural value of this dress. We had seen that the Lambadas are predominantly found in northwestern India, that is in the states of Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra and South India. During the course of their migration, they have retained one particular form of identity, that is their speech and also their dress. Though they live amongst their neighbors who predominantly wear a different type of dress, we see that this particular dress has not been discarded, or the majority influences have not imposed their pattern of wearing dress, because this dress also, any dress for that matter in India, has certain symbolic meanings. Here we see that this particular type of dress has certain peculiar features, that is, one is a large scale use of mirror work and second is a use of bangles. These bangles are made from material which is very strong. Nowadays they are made of plastic, which adds to the fact that these bangles cannot be easily broken even when they are engaged in agriculture. As we had already mentioned about, the number of bangles are less here. This is a Banjara woman reaping millets in her field, and we again here notice that the different type of jewelry, that is silver jewelry, and also the mirror work which is part of her attire. This is a close up view, and we also have some medallions. Nowadays many of the medallions used are also, particularly here, are also coins are being converted into medallions. We can again notice here the mirror work and the finery. So, when we talk about dress, we have talked about sari, but sari is for women. But then what about the girls who are below the age, below the marriageable age, or who are not children? So, we see that for them we have a different dress which is known as half sari, but not a full sari, which is known in different by different names in different regions. In Tamil Nadu it is called as Pavadai Davani. From this dress one can clearly infer the fact that this girl is unmarried. So, this is a dress which is the girl starts wearing from the onset of puberty till the marriageable age. So, this dress is a transitional dress when a girl enters womanhood, but is still not married. So, we can see this particular type of transition, that is, this is a particular stage in the life of a woman. So, therefore, this dress. Before the girl attains puberty, this is a dress, again this is just known only as a pavada or pavade, or different, also commonly known as a skirt. Normally the skirts worn and the blouses worn by small children are made of cotton, but this is for a special occasion, and therefore silk is used for this particular dress. Now, we get here a clear indication about, in this painting, about the peasants going to work in their field. Obviously, they are carrying pots, and the kind of dress which they are using are very simple, because these dresses are meant for everyday wear in the fields. Here is again a section on the peasants working in the fields. We notice some differences, that is, the dresses are all covering parts of the head, because to protect the head from the sunlight first, and secondly we see that the legs are also, the dresses on the legs are raised up so as to prevent them from becoming soiled. This, as we had seen, is part of the everyday attire or the production oriented work of the people. This is again an example of a tribal woman in Orissa who wears a dress without a blouse. So, we have seen that in India there are two major tribal regions. So, the tribal women also wear dresses which are similar to their neighbors, but which are suitably modified, keeping into account their cultural and other aspects, the other aspects including the availability of materials and also the way they function. So, two major regions where we have the concentration of tribals in India are the, one is the northeast India and second is central India. The central Indian belt extending from the states of northern Andhra, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Orissa, almost the whole of Jharkhand and parts of North Bengal, and in the west extending to Gujarat and Maharashtra and Rajasthan, form the biggest chunk of tribal belt of India. The other region with a predominant population of tribals is in northeast India. It is these two regions where we find a wide diversity of ethnic groups. For example, in Northeast India we see that there are more than 175 different ethnic groups, and each of these different tribal and other groups can be identified on the basis of the attire which they wear. The predominant tribes in the central Indian region are the Gonds, the Santals, the Mundas, the Ho, the Meenas and other major tribes. Many of them follow slash and burn agriculture and other forms of agriculture. This is another example of a peasant. Here the peasant is not wearing the turban, but the peasant is wearing a cap. This peasant is clearly identifiable, as we had said that there are regional markers for dress. This peasant is coming from Maharashtra because this particular dress is very popular, that is the attire, the cap or the Gandhi cap is a popular dress in Maharashtra. We see that the peasant does not wear the typical upper part of the cloth which is worn as a kurta, because this is much more conducive for his work in the field. This is another example of the peasants working in the field. We can clearly here see that, like the tribal women, here the saris are a little bit raised till the knee so as to help in the everyday work and also prevent waterlogging or the dress getting soiled. This is also another example of the peasants working. We have concentrated on peasants because they form the largest component of Indian society. Here also we notice that the dress, the sari, a different variation is used, and that the cloth used is cotton, which is much more simple rather than the ritual or ceremonial dress, and very well suited for the wear. The top part is suitably modified to cover the head. This is also a sign of deference in front of elders or in front of approaching members of different communities, as the social codes show, though there is a lot of contestation about this. This is also another example of the farmer preparing the beds for the rice. This transplantation of rice involves lot of work in the muddy fields, and therefore the dress is liable to get soiled. Therefore, here in this case we see the farmer trying to transplant. So, he is wearing a dress with minimal clothing. Normally a loin cloth was worn, but nowadays the loin cloth is being discarded in favor of half pants, since many members of different communities were not allowed to wear full dhotis. Therefore, the loin cloth was seen as a symbol of subjugation of members of certain castes, particularly the depressed castes who were not allowed to wear turbans and dhotis and also walk in the main streets of the village. So, in deference to that, they have stopped using the loin cloth, but have started wearing other dresses which are equally conducive in their day to day operations. This is a example of a farmer ready to transplant the rice. This is again an example of the Santal community from Jharkhand region, which I had already told you is the biggest contiguous tribal region in the whole of India. Here we see that the women and men are participating in a dance, and they wear saris and dhotis. The only difference is that the dhoti of the man is raised a little bit above, and also the sari of the women, unlike the women who are portrayed in the ceremonial or in the traditional Indian households, where the sari touches the ground or the feet, this is raised above as part of their everyday life and work. In addition to the Santals, many other tribal groups, the Santals incidentally are one of the largest tribal groups in India, numbering around 2 million. We also have other large tribal groups like the Bhils, the Gonds and the Meenas, who number around millions of people and follow similar dress pattern. The differences can be easily palpable in their headgear and also the type of borders which they use. The other aspect is, this is also another example of another tribal woman from central India. This photo is from Jharkhand. She is coming out of her house, and we see the motifs outside her house. Here again the saree is raised, and she also is wearing bangles. The only difference we had seen about the tribal woman in the earlier picture was that she wasn't wearing a blouse. Here, in consonance with modernity, many of the women have started wearing blouses and have adapted different forms of modern behavior without integrating it into their tradition, without losing their traditional cultural values. Now, this is another modification and Indianized version of the Indo-Turkish dress. This is locally known as salwar kameez. This is coming from a fashion model. This is by and large becoming the most popular dress for women in urban India. There are many reasons for this. The firstly is that this dress was not popular till recently because of its association with Muslims, which was a misconcepted fact, but nevertheless part of some local superstitions. Therefore, many women, particularly in southern India, did not wear the salwar kameez, which has only caught on recently. Reason being that it is very convenient, and also we see that another area where the sari, which was a traditional dress, is losing its hold is Bengal, and also in the contiguous region of Bangladesh, where the salwar kameez has taken over the entire younger generation. So, this we see this particular development is also tied up with the rise of the nuclear family. In the nuclear family, we see that value formation is not concurrent, that is from father to daughter, son to daughter, since all members do not stay under one roof, but it is consecutive. Therefore, the nuclear families staying in urban areas are more prone to adopt this type of dress, since they are also not much tied to the ceremonial and ritual restrictions as their brethren in the village. Incidentally, this dress is also being called as modern dress in many of the rural areas. The male variant of this dress is the kurta pajama. Here also we have different dress. This particular dress, if you see, has two parts, that is a lower part which is stitched and upper part. The younger generation in many parts of North India, particularly in the urban areas, do not prefer to wear the dhoti because it is cumbersome and also because of the procedures involved, and therefore have cleanly switched to the kurta pajama. The only difference here is that the kurta is always worn mostly in white color, sorry, the pajama. The kurta we see has rich embellishment and embroidery. Here we come to the changes in the style of kurta which took place decisively during the period of Emperor Jahangir. As we had seen that the type of kurta here we have is a stitched kurta, that is the neck is stitched. It was only during the period of Emperor Jahangir that after matrimonial alliances with the Rajputs, the Rajput policy of Akbar, that we had seen that Jahangir initiated a model by which the Indian way of wearing the kurta, which was the two ropes met and they were tied together rather than the use of buttons. So, this was adopted as a symbol of Hindu-Muslim unity, that is a confluence of the two cultural streams. This is the example of a band gala or a closed kurta. This was the dress which were worn by the early Mughals, and later during Jahangir's period it was rapidly switched over to a dress which could accommodate the cultural values of both these sections. This particular dress, as we have seen, is embellished with silk and gold thread and also has a cloth accessory, that is a dupatta. This is a replacement for the turban and particularly for males, and is worn predominantly on ritual occasions. These occasions are marriage and certain family rituals, or even on ceremonies like parties. Now we come to the different types of women's dresses in different regions of India. We see that though the saree is predominantly worn by women, there are also considerable types of variations of sarees. There are other different dresses which also are being used in everyday life in different parts and are numerically numbering into millions. This is the dress of the women from Himachal. A slight variation of this particular dress can also be seen in the hills of Uttaranchal and also in the adjoining region of Kashmir. Here we see that this is a dress which serves the purpose of a working woman in the high altitude cold regions of Himachal Pradesh. The particular type of motifs and the colors used clearly show that this dress is from Himachal Pradesh. The same motif is also used in the caps and other accessories for people coming from Himachal Pradesh. So, these particular motifs and colors, each of them convey a meaning which will be illustrated in the next slide. Now, as we had seen that there is not much of divide among the younger generation, we had also seen that dresses people can be identified by the attire they wear on to the identity which they belong to and also which they perform. Here we see, for example, many of the dresses, these are the two different types of dresses worn by Indian Muslim women, that is the white abaya or scarf worn by the girl on the last, and this is also another dress which is a fully covered burqa worn by women. Though the burqa is supposed to be the dress worn by South Asian Muslim women, this is black dress, we also see that notable exceptions are there in different states and also in rural areas. This is the type of burqa which is worn, which is unlike the Arab burqa where the entire face is covered with a veil. So, this is the particular dress which is worn in South Asia among the Muslim women, though we will also see the regional variations. This is a dress which is also the burqa in which the veil covers the face. This picture is from Hyderabad. It has also been argued that this strives to help the woman protect her from certain undesirable situations. This is again a Muslim woman and a husband from Kashmir, but here we see that they do not wear the burqa. Therefore, as we had already talked about religion, we also have to take into consideration region and different community, that is caste or other identities from which the people belong to. So, here in this picture we have a bride and a groom from Kashmir. The groom is wearing a dress and a headgear symbolizing Pathan connection, that is from Afghanistan, whereas the woman is wearing a typical Kashmiri dress. Here she does not wear the burqa, which only shows that there is no monolithic way of looking at dress in India, both in the sense of a regional or a religious identity. Just crossing the border from Kashmir, when we go to the other side of the hills, that is in the side of Ladakh, we find the Ladakhi women dressed in this particular style. Though Ladakh is known as Little Tibet or was earlier known as Tibbet-i-Kurd and is a Tibetanized culture following Tibetan Buddhism, we see that there are slight differences between the Tibetans. The dress of the Ladakhi woman is known as the goncha, which is a gown, whereas in Tibetan they call it chuba, and here we see that the beautiful part is the perak or the turquoise on their head. These women are outside the monastery or the gompa. This is a dress which they wear throughout the year owing to the cold. The feet is always covered. So, here we see that this is also the dress worn by many Ladakhi Muslim women, the only difference being that they do not wear the perak or the headgear. So, we had seen that the predominant dress is dhoti in India, but also we have different regions. So, each of these regions has certain specificities and influences from neighboring regions or certain historical reasons. So, this region has influence from Tibet, which is a neighboring region, particularly central Tibet. Here we again come to the dress, ceremonial dress among young Muslims belonging to the Dawoodi Bohra community. The fact that they are belonging to the Dawoodi Bohra community is clearly identified from the headgear or the on which they wear. So, apart from this, both the Hindus and the Muslims wear the same dress. Now, we have seen that with the dhoti losing its popularity in North India, we have many different types of variants of the dhoti, that is the local dresses which are worn in South India, which again is a white dhoti worn in the style of a sarong, is known as the mundu in Kerala or the veshti in Tamil Nadu. This is a style of wearing the particular dress. The difference here is that we see here this particular lungi which is worn clearly indicates that this person is from South India. In Kerala, we also have a tradition of identifying the person from the style he wears the lungi. Normally, we see that the dhoti or the lungi, that is the mundu, which is as known in Kerala, is worn by both the Hindus and Christians converging on the right side, whereas among members of the Muslim community traditionally they used to wear the dhoti coming to the left side. So, here we see that this is one of the lungis. In the next slide it will become much more clearer, because this dress is very useful for everyday life. This is a group of fishermen wearing this particular dress. So, here we have the fishermen wearing this dress, that is the knees are clearly visible and the lungi is folded. So, this is worn like a typical dress of the sarong of Southeast Asia. Different types of lungis also have different patterns which also indicate the regions from which they come from, particularly checks, stripes, then large patterns which are clearly in vogue in the states. For example, as we had seen the pattern in Himachal Pradesh, similar patterns predominate in eastern India. This is the dhoti known in South India. This is particularly from Kerala and the wearer can be easily identified. He is standing in front of a lamp. The dhoti is worn on the right side, that is the mundu, and it clearly shows that the is worn in the Hindu style. This particular type of wearing the dhoti is peculiar to Kerala and Tamil Nadu, whereas in the other parts of South India it is the dhoti is known as the panchi or the panchagacham, which is worn predominantly only by members of the priestly class now. This dress is also adopted as a dress which is used by all members of the society, predominantly visible in small towns, traders, officials, and also synonymous with politicians. One of the significant aspects of this dress is, though it is white, it clearly shows borders. So, these borders show a sense of affiliation of the person to different, sometimes pronouncedly political parties. Here again we come to religious dress. We have seen now everyday dress of the peasants, the everyday dress of different women belong to different religious communities. We now come to religious dresses. So, in India we have certain religious traditions, particularly pilgrimages or vratas, which developed from the early medieval period, that is from the 5th century AD, when Puranic religion became one of the mainstream religions of India. So, when Puranic religion became the mainstream, many different local practices like visiting a sacred shrine were thought to be powerful. So, now we have here this particular dress of a Hindu priest worshipping the goddess Nandi in Karnataka. This is again another slide showing a marriage. Here we have a ritual specialist who is clearly seen that he is a Nambudiri Brahmin by showing the hair which is parted in the tucked in the center into a top knot. The top part of the body is always kept uncovered, as we see that in many temples of Kerala and Tamil Nadu, and also some of the early Puranic beliefs that since the top part of the body, if it is worn, the dress worn would be a kurta, then it would be a stitched cloth. So, the dress which was covering the top part of the body was a angavastram. This is a dress of another religious minority who is a microscopic minority in India, namely the Zoroastrians or the Parsis. So, the Zoroastrians or the Parsis have come to India and also have become Indianized, while the women of the Zoroastrian community wear the saris similar to the Gujarati women, since they also have adopted Gujarati names, titles and many aspects of Gujarati lifestyle. We see that the men predominantly have, though they wear Gujarati dresses, they also innovated and kept alive their traditions. One of this tradition is the wearing of the headgear, traditional headgear, which the younger boy is being instructed by the elder boy. That is, he also has in his hand a rosary. We now come to a different section of Indian society who are not part of the mainstream society. This particular section of Indian society involves religious specialists. We had seen the religious specialists who are the priests in the marriages. Here we have these religious specialists who are known as sadhus or sannyasis. We have sadhus or sannyasis, wandering Sufi monks. Sadhus or sannyasis are Hindu, wandering Sufi monks are Muslim, and we also have different Sikhs professing the Sikh faith, and also other people from Buddhist and other religions. So, here we have the person who is having a long beard, very shriveled, and also carrying in his hand a trishul, showing that he is a Shaivite or a follower of Shiva. The dress is also soiled because he is on a pilgrimage. Predominantly the dress used by sadhus is of a particular color. The color is saffron. Like the color white symbolizes purity, the color saffron symbolizes renunciation, renunciation from all worldly ties. So, they have entered a different plane, and therefore, they are always using the color saffron. Here the color saffron is much more clearly visible, where he does not have any possessions except a begging bowl, and therefore, the full expression of the color saffron is given. The turban also has certain markings which show Jai Shri Ram or some whichever sect to which the person is affiliated. So, when we come to religious specialists of the Hindu religious specialists, we see that they are sadhus. Again, this is a these are also religious specialists, but only for a temporary period. Unlike the sadhus we had seen here, these sadhus are sadhus for life, means they once they have taken the vow of renunciation, they cannot return back. Whereas we see that this is a temporary type of pilgrimage in which the people undertake pilgrimage for a fixed period. This is known as the Shabarimala pilgrimage of Kerala, in which the people, this temple is open only to men, and millions of men to the tune of around 18 to 20 million by higher estimates attend this temple after undertaking a 40-day penance. The 40-day penance, during this 40-day penance, there are certain strict conditions which a person, normal person must take up like a sadhu. Firstly, he should stop taking non-veg for these 40 days, get up every day morning at 3:30, do prayers, then finally abstain from any relations with family members, that is with his wife, and also take only food which is cooked in clean surroundings and perform prayers. After this, after the 40 days are over, only then is the person eligible for prayers and attending the temple. So, during this whole period, most of the men only wear the black dress. The black dress incidentally has an interesting story. Normally we see that religious people wear, in the Hindu tradition, prefer saffron. Here it is said that when the Sabarimala temple is located deep inside the forest, and when the early devotees went there in the around 2 or 3 centuries back, they were being chased by elephants in the thick jungles. So, therefore, they started wearing the color black to scare away the elephants. So, this has become a accepted norm and a fact all over in many parts of southern and western India. Another variation of ritual dress is among the Kavad or the Kavadiyas, who sing the chant Shankar, Bam Bam Bole, and keep on traveling for very large distances, and they carry the Kavad, which is a arch shaped ritual contraption on their shoulders, and then finally they bring with them the holy water from the Ganges. So here also the dress is very simple. Originally this was a dress which they used to wear saffron. Now for convenience many of the younger generation have shifted to the trousers, but nevertheless maintain the color saffron. So here we have the different types of dress among the Muslim community during the festival. We can clearly see that most of them in the month of Ramzan they are wearing the skull caps, which are the traditional caps of the Muslims, the style followed in India. This is another type of dress, a turban worn not by normal ordinary members of the average Sikh community, but by ritual specialists like the Nihangs. So they are entitled to wear this particular type of headgear only after observing certain rituals, that is taking Amrit. So they are known as Amrit Dari. Like we had seen that in the earlier slide, that is we have only members of the Muslim laity. These are members of laity, but we do not have ritual specialists here. But here these are ritual specialists belonging to the Sikh community. Another example of a Nihang is here, and we also have beside him two other Sikh gentlemen who are lay members of the community and who wear normal dresses prescribed for the Sikh community, that is they have a turban and a beard. We have young boys again dressed. Here we have laymen, and then here we have children who are taking part in the religious activities. Here we see that the Sikh religion prescribes that every male adult has to wear 5 particular dress parts, that is known as the 5 Ks, that is the kesh or the hair both on the head and the beard should never be cut, the kesh. Then second is the khanga or the comb which has to be kept on top of the head, and the turban ties it and therefore it is concealed. The third is the kada or the amulet made of steel which every Sikh gentleman wears. The fourth is the kacha or the shorts, and the fifth is the kirpan. We can see all of these, that is some of the kirpans are clearly visible, that is they are larger in size, that is a big sword. So these are the 5 Ks enjoined by the Sikh religion, that all the faithful should wear them at all times. So this is a clear expression of that particular dictate. We have another different example of a Sikh Baba. Now we come to Christianity and ritual specialists. Normally whenever we only see Christian fathers who are shown in the dress of the Western model, that is wearing a white robe of the Roman Catholic Church. In India we see that among the Christians we have the oldest Christian settlement in the early centuries of the Christian era, which is the St. Thomas Church, who are known in Kerala today as the Syrian Christians. They belong to the Syrian Marthoma Church, the Syrian Jacobite Church and the Orthodox Church. Here the Christian ritual specialists of Kerala have adopted a dress. We can clearly see here that the cross is different from the cross of the which is normally portrayed, that is the edges are different. So this clearly shows that he is from the Syrian Orthodox, that is the Jacobite Church, and this is the particular dress. This dress can be found among the Orthodox traditions of West Asia, that is particularly in the churches of Iraq and the Near East, which were the oldest churches prior to the introduction of Christianity even in Europe. This is again a congregation of that particular church. We see here the earlier picture had showed us the patriarch of the church, and these are the other ordained fathers, clergy of the particular church in Kerala. Here this is the address with the ritual scepter and the cross. This is again a picture of a Sikh gentleman who is a laity and who is following the religious precepts enjoined on him by the sacred text, seated on the lawns of the Golden Temple in the near the sacred tank. This is another adaptation of the Sikh youth to the modern trends, that is they have taken up all the modern dresses, but have not left behind their traditional dress, that is the turban and the beard, though the kirpan or the sword is concealed. This is also another example. This is another example of a turban from Western India. Interestingly, the story of turban is to be viewed not only in terms of dress, but also in terms of other interesting aspects like social strata. For example, many members of the society were not allowed to wear turbans because this was reserved only for members of superordinate classes. Therefore, the so called subaltern communities were not allowed to wear turban because it showed that they would assert themselves. So, the function of the turban here is not only to protect the wearer from heat, but also to assert his status, which is a part of his traditional attire. The colors of the turban are also very interesting. Normally, we see that among the Sikh community, blue is the preferred turban, whereas in parts of Haryana, green is the preferred color for turban. In both these regions and in Rajasthan, we see that the color white is used only by the older people, whereas the color pink is used as a turban in Hindu religious tradition only for ceremonial purposes, that is for marriage. Whereas in Western India, particularly in Maharashtra and parts of northern Andhra, that is Telangana and neighboring regions of Gujarat, we find that white is a preferred color used by the peasants for the turbans, though in Maharashtra it is now changing to the Gandhi cap. So, this is the turban being used by members of the shepherd community in Gujarat. So, here we see two members belonging to two different generations, that is wearing the traditional dress and also wearing the modern dress. This is from Saurashtra. Now, we have this is the blue turban, which is the the pink turban, and this is a method of tying the turban, which is locally known as safa in Rajasthan. Now, we have in Maharashtra one of the most the replacement for the turban. This also, as we had seen, that there were three important periods in Indian which dictated Indian dress. One was during the 2nd century BC, when we had the emergence of tucked clothes and a disdain for stitched clothes. The second was in the 13th century, when we had the introduction of new stitched clothes after the Turkish invasions. The third decisive intervention took place during the freedom struggle. The freedom struggle was a struggle, as we all know, against British colonialism and also against British culture. During this period, we have this particular cap, which is known in Maharashtra as Gandhi cap. This cap becomes very popular among the peasants, also not only as a convenience for their everyday work in the field, but also as an expression of their solidarity to the freedom struggle. It has caught on all over Maharashtra. Incidentally, we see that during this particular cap and the coat associated with this are made from the material khadi. This will become clearer. This is the cap. So, making this cap by after spinning it and also spinning it from cotton by one's own hand and then also weaving it became part of an ethos of the Indian freedom struggle and a part of the attire. Here we see an old man wearing the typical Gandhi cap from Maharashtra. Here the turban was replaced by the cap and dressed in white. The picture of India would be incomplete without looking into another great tribal region, that is, we had seen the Central Indian tribal region. We have another tribal region in Northeast India, where people are predominantly of the Mongoloid stock and speaking a wide variety of Tibeto-Burman languages. Here we have more than 175 ethnic groups. To the outsider, they all may seem similar, but when we ask any person belonging to that region, he can identify each member of the ethnic group based on the dress they wear. So, this is a dress being worn by the Bodos. The Bodos are the largest plains tribe of Assam, and we have two types of categories of tribes, that is the hill tribes and then the plain tribes. The Bodos are a Tibeto-Burman plains tribe in Assam. This is a particular type of Bodo dress, and we see here, in contrast to other regions, the emphasis is on yellow color, which will be clear when we look at the other slides of the and attire of the different tribes. So, this is a tribe, this is a lady belonging to the Naga tribe. So, here we see that the shawl which she wears is black in color and also has certain inscription, certain motifs. What happens here is that this particular dress is worn only by the older generation in case of women, and also in case of men only the elders or others wear it on ceremonial occasions, whereas the youth have taken to wearing modern dress. Then it will become clear in the next slide. This is another performance by the Vidya-mitra Manipuris. We see that in Manipur we have two major sections of the society, that is the Hindu Meiteis who are the plainsmen, and then we have the tribals in the hills of Manipur, that is mainly who belong to the Kuki and the Naga cultures. So, among the Manipuris, the Vishnupriyas are shown in this particular dress. Here we can see in addition to them they also have a drum. So, this dress is used only mainly for performances, that is to Lord Vishnu. This is another example of a Naga woman wearing a dress. Here we again see the different motifs on her shawl. The color of the shawl and the motifs on the shawl clearly show from which tribe she has come. This is clearly illustrated in this. From this shawl we can come to know that these two elders belong to the Ao Naga group. We have around 16 major clans in the Nagas. Predominantly we see the Ao, Angami and Sema. So, this particular dress is of two elders. So, particularly here we see this chieftain. The motifs here contain a number of animals which are not there in the dress of the other the neighboring man who is standing next to him. This shows his superordinate status and also a sign of valor. This is another dress. This is from the Meiteis of Manipur. This is used for the particularly the dance, that is the Chow dance. This is again a ceremonial dress. As we had talked about dress and change, now most of the dresses in modern India, the youth have taken to wearing western dress, as the women have taken, like we had seen the male female divide in color, that is most of the men we had seen here all along the period have been wearing dresses which were white, that is the white dhoti and the white kurta, whereas the women were wearing colorful dresses, whether be it a sari, be it a shawl, etc. But here in the modern period we have seen that the women have predominantly stuck to Indian dresses, that is a transition from sari to salwar kameez kurta, whereas the men have started wearing the modern dress. But in the case of Northeast India we see that they have started wearing the western dresses in a large fashion. But here also we see some prevalence of tradition here. For example, the traditional clothes or motifs. This is a typical traditional Mizo motif. This is a group of students from Mizoram. This particular Mizo motif was hand woven. So, now which since it was earlier worn as a shawl and wearing of shawl is not possible today in the offices, etc. So, this is converted into a shirt. So, this is another example of a modern Indian youth who has taken the western dress. So, this concept of western dress which was delegitimized during the freedom struggle also re-emerged as another aspect of debate, which we shall come into. This is another example of western dress. So, how did this question come about? This question comes about as a debate between Gandhi and Ambedkar, when Gandhi says that emphasizes the importance of Indian dress, that is the khadi or the homespun dress, whereas Dr. B.R. Ambedkar starts wearing the coat and the suit. He says that it is a symbol of empowerment because my people have not been allowed to wear this dress. So, for them it is a sign of advancement, whereas for Gandhi this dress is a symbol against the British resistance. So, both these streams of thought today continue in Indian society. This is along with the Gandhian dress we also have another trend, that is the khadi or handmade clothes. Now, today with the rise, as we had seen, of designer dresses, the marriage between khadi and designer has also gone on in a new dimension. That is, we see that this is no longer the original silk, but this is known as the ahimsa silk. We had seen that the designer dresses which are catered for the high end market and also for the West have also integrated many aspects of khadi. The aspects of khadi which are integrated here are, we are seeing that there is a widespread feeling against the killing of so many silkworms for khadi, and hence we see the use of this silk which is spun only after the insects, the worms have died, and therefore extracted in a very non violent fashion. Thank you.